All right. So what I made today is shorter and sweeter. If you listen to this show, you know I'm anything but succinct. But what I attempted to do was actually outline some muscle. What exactly is BlackRock's muscle here? Because BlackRock says in its Q&A, this is why I bring it up, right? Like they actually in their FAQ on the letter, they say, what does sustainability mean in the investment context? And they basically say that sustainability means incorporating environmental, social governance factors into decision making. So they said, to translate that for anybody who doesn't know what any of that means, they said sustainability means using sustainability to make decisions.
Right.
So it's sort of meaningless. So to understand actually what they
sort of meaningless,
what they're capable of doing, I actually wanted to get into like a case study of what they've done. BlackRock owns effectively 17% of the U.S. market, where they are a dominant shareholder. And by dominant, I mean the single largest shareholder in a company. So almost 1/5 of all U.S. companies, BlackRock is the dominant shareholder.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Incredible. Yeah.
That's a big number. Vanguard's up there too. I mean, like between the three of them, between Vanguard, BlackRock, and like Fidelity, you are talking about basically 2/3 of the market where they're the dominant shareholders.
Where's Free Float Media in that?
Free Float Media owns negative percentage of the U.S. market currently.
Okay. Got to work on that.
Of that, just at a high level, okay, and I asked a friend of a friend for some MSCI data on this.
Ooh.
I have friends. 15% of the companies where BlackRock is the dominant shareholder, where they're the biggest shareholder, they rank in the bottom quarter of environmental performers globally. So effectively, 15% of companies that BlackRock has the most muscle, they are the largest shareholder, are the worst environmental performers in the world, not the U.S., the world, relative to their industries.
Well, I will add that BlackRock itself is not committed to disclosing its own climate risk across its own portfolios.
That's correct. So here is where BlackRock can have the most leverage. So if you're asking, where would you, like, this letter's lovely, but where does the rubber hit the road? What would you expect to happen? This is where you should be able to see an immediate impact, because BlackRock has the most muscle at these companies that they're a dominant shareholder and they're poor environmental performers. Okay. So this is an idea that Professor Rick Marshall, our ex-colleague, came up with, called beta engagement. I don't know if it's just Rick Marshall's, but I put his face up there saying beta engagement as a visual because I like Rick Marshall. Beta engagement is the idea that you can change an entire market, because you're such a big player, by voting on one issue, by muscling one issue across the board. An example of this is investors in the U.S. used to not be allowed to elect their own board members. They had to wait for management to put up a board member to elect them. But these massive pension funds all banded together and decided, we don't like that. On every single proxy right now, we're going to put on the ballot to be allowed to vote for our own directors. And the U.S. went from something like 6% of companies allowed that to 70% of companies allowed that in the span of like 3 years, because the pension fund said, we want to change the entire market practice. That is what BlackRock can do with environmental issues if it really wanted to. We're talking about a huge swath of companies where it is the muscle by itself. It can do that. Okay. So I pulled some of the companies that actually make the most sense to target. Most of the companies are going to be small and mid-cap energy companies. One in particular is the case study I want to do, a company called Bonanza Creek Energy. Now, Bonanza Creek Energy actually went through Chapter 11. They filed for bankruptcy a few years ago because they got hit by the drop in oil prices, and they're a small player, and they've reemerged, and it's gone well, and they are a natural gas fracker is what they are. They frack. Okay. And if you don't know what fracking is, it's effectively, what's the best way to describe it? Blowing shit up underground to get some
get at it.
dirty oil, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
it's the things humans do are unbelievable. Now, BlackRock owns Bonanza Creek Energy in a number of its funds, but in its total USA index, it owns Bonanza Creek Energy. Last year, BlackRock actually voted to withhold. Now, withhold is like not voting against. It's like, we're not going to vote. It's supposed to signal your displeasure with management without actually being aggro about it. BlackRock owns almost 14% of Bonanza Creek's shares, making them a massive player for Bonanza Creek. They withheld votes from 3 of their board members, the entire nominating committee.
Do we know why?
So they don't say why, right? But you would think, oh, well, this is good news. They are muscling a company with poor environmental performance because Bonanza Creek ranks in the bottom of environmental performers globally, and they're muscling them. But and then you see headlines like the one I found in the local news: 7 oil and gas companies were sued for violating the Clean Air Act in Weld County. Weld County is where Bonanza Creek operates, and they were one of the companies sued. But then when you look at BlackRock's votes, what you actually find is they voted for all the rest of the directors.
Right.
So why? This is kind of a prime example to me of where BlackRock can show its muscle. I looked up every one of these directors, and of them, and I'm gonna play us out here. Of them, almost all of them either work in energy or in finance. And the energy company people, like, they've come from Anadarko, they've come from Encana, which is a massive oil sands company in Canada that's had tremendous amount of environmental issues and pressure put on them. These are not board members from like Tree Hugging Society or renewable energy companies. These are board members who have a track record of environmental issues as executives or board members at other companies. So BlackRock votes to withhold votes for the nominating committee. Maybe that's a step in the right direction. Maybe it's not. But this is where you'll see the muscle. If you want to know whether whether Larry Fink is true about this letter, you'll see it in the way they vote at companies like this. And this is where people like us should start asking questions.
Yeah, and someone needs to keep track of all this. And I will say, I just looked up Bonanza Creek. Here's a possible reason why BlackRock voted against them. I don't know their voting policies, but here are the names of the board members. Ready? Paul, Brian, Tom, Jack, Scott, Jeff, Eric. So it's possible that BlackRock has a voting policy where that if you have 0 women on the board, that they hold the nomination committee responsible for that nonsense.
Well, I will also say that Paul, who you mentioned, who they withheld a vote for, is on, I'm not kidding you, 9 other boards.
Oh. All right, well, maybe there's some women on those boards. Maybe he can make some friends.
No, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Anyway, all right,
Relax
thanks, Matt.
yourself.